It's Joe Pardavila, and you're listening to the Forbes Books Podcast. And when people ask me how I'm doing, I'd usually say something like, I'm living the dream. But I didn't say it in a sarcastic manner. I really meant it. I get to talk into a microphone for a living. But my guest this week is literally living the dream of pretty much any child on the planet. She runs a company that makes teddy bears. Her name is Sharon Price John, and she is the CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop. She's also the author of the wonderful new book, Stories in Heart, which comes out in early 2023. But you can go to storiesinheart.com and sign up for updates and notifications. So today we're going to talk about what it's like being the CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop, how she steered the company during the pandemic, and how she helped turn Build-A-Bear into an e-com giant. Hey Sharon, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent, but I don't think I'm as good as you because it's cool to be a CEO, but it's even cooler to be a CEO of like a really, really cool company like Build-A-Bear. So that's got to be pretty awesome.
Every day it's fun. We're making teddy bears. And sometimes we even talk about that, like, the things that you do every day and whenever we have challenges, and we do. And when there's, difficulties that come our way or additional efforts that we have to make, we go, hey guys, everybody just remember, we're just making teddy bears here.
And talk to me about that sort of like paralysis by analysis, because you're a big ass company. This is not like this little, mom and pop shop. This is a big company, publicly traded. And so how do you keep focus on that? Because it's like me when I was doing a radio show in New York, it's like, there's all this drama, internal, external, but at the end of the day, you're just doing a radio show. And like you said, at the end of the day, you're making teddy bears. You're making people happy. How are you able to avoid, like I mentioned, the paralysis by analysis?
Oh, look, when there's, 3,000 plus people involved and publicly traded company, as you noted, and lots of different, retail locations with the sun never setting on your company, you're not going to avoid challenges, and you're not going to avoid the drama, and you're not going to avoid the analysis. But it's important, I think, for a company like ours to just keep remembering that our mission statement is to add a little more heart to life. And we really try to live that mission statement. We try to live it with our guests. We try to live it internally. We try to live it with each other. And there's always going to be those moments where it seems like it's just overwhelming. And particularly when you're in a business where the quarters matter and the seasons matter, and a lot is ultimately reliant on the holiday season and getting products in from all over the world and managing that and the warehouses. It's a lot, but you try to stay focused and stay centered on what really matters. And we believe a hug is understood in every language, and try to just take a pause when it gets a little too unpredictable. And you know what? The thing about it is that in this environment with so much unpredictability, it's working new muscles, like being agile and innovative, that helps you recognize that just because there are challenges, it doesn't mean there is an opportunity associated with it. Some of it's about the way you look at things and the attitude that you take into what you might call a challenge or what somebody else might call an opportunity.
And I'd love to talk about your leadership journey, because speaking of cool jobs, I mean, you've worked for some really, really cool companies like Mattel, VTech, and Hasbro. How did those other jobs prepare you for this, like to run Build-A-Bear?
That's a great question. It's really fascinating, I think, when you look back on your life and you start to connect the dots. And in so many ways, every step along this journey has prepared me for this amazing moment, being able to run Build-A-Bear now for coming up on 9 years. Wow. And taking this company through an evolution and returning it to profitability. But, from my early days at Mattel, clearly the toy industry was helpful in this particular area. But the early days at Mattel, I worked on Barbie and Barbie fashions, and that's called cut and stitch, so you're sourcing fabric-based, sewing-based products, and that's ultimately what Build-A-Bear is. And then go to Hasbro and VTech, where we're focusing on, kids, more younger kids products, particularly my last days at Hasbro. My last responsibility was the head of global preschool. And that's the core target of Build-A-Bear. But, also at Hasbro in my previous roles where I was heading the U.S. toy division, we spoke to the teens, tweens, and adults in some of this more entertainment and collectible space, whether it's, Transformers or My Little Pony. And then I did have the opportunity to work at Stride Right Children's Group, where I learned a lot about specialty retail and both kids and moms marketing. So it's really uncanny in some ways when the call came for me to consider this position, how relevant so many of the steps along this path made sense.
What goes through your brain when you get the call? It's like, and it's not like you were getting the call to the majors because you were working for these major brands to begin with, but now it's your chance to be the CEO of a company. Were you at the point of your life that you're like, yeah, this is just the natural evolution of Sharon Price John, where now I'm going to be the CEO of a brand and company like Build-A-Bear?
Boy, wouldn't it be nice if you could map it out like that? I really don't know a lot of people where that's the way it goes. But when I did get the call, it felt like a natural evolution, some of it because of what we just talked about. But not everything's going to be perfect. It's not, you're usually getting a call because there's probably, to take a role like this, because there probably is a challenge. And
Right.
It doesn't mean that the answer's going to be the easiest one in the world. Like, yay, I'm going to be a CEO of a publicly traded company. Not everybody finds that attractive. A lot of chatter about that. And I don't know, I looked at it and contemplated it and, read the annual reports and dug into the much financials as I could. And ultimately, this opportunity had a great founder with a lot of passion, and the brand was very well known and extraordinarily beloved. And because of the experience at Stride Right, having turned around the retail arm, I felt like I could perhaps bring some of that experience to Build-A-Bear. And because of my background at Hasbro and Mattel, I had learned a lot about how to drive and build and monetize innate equity in brands. So it was in an environment that I felt like that I had some expertise and background, and I felt comfortable making that leap and was willing to take the chance.
And you mentioned the founder, Maxine Clark, who founded Build-A-Bear. I think it's going over 25 years now, which is kind of shocking to believe. But talk to me about that relationship and how important to you was to have this relationship with Maxine, even though she was sort of seeding day-to-day activities and sort of leaving things up to you to make big decisions. What was that like initially, and what's it like now?
Maxine's an extraordinary person. She's a powerhouse. Her mind never stops working. She's full of ideas and excitement, and she loves this business and loves this brand just like you might imagine any founder would. And in some cases, and I think she would be the first to tell you, it was hard to give some of that up. And she is quite proud of noting that the first and most important job of a founder is to start the company and make it successful and get it on strong footing. But the second most important job of a founder is to transition it effectively and successfully. And she's very generous in her sharing of that, in that she believes that I was that person. But at the same time, anytime there is a founder transition, it's not just about the person that is transitioning to. It's so much about the founder having that graciousness and willingness to let the next person in line even make some of those, mistakes, or you might say in her mind, or do things that were different than what she may have chosen to do, and be able to ask advice and insights and be there when you need her and know innately when you don't. I can't give Maxine enough accolades on her ability to do that when I know there were times when she probably wanted to say more and didn't. But maybe even sometimes when I didn't want her to say more and she did anyway. That was good for me to hear.
Oh, and so you mentioned challenges because, when any CEO opening happens, it's either the CEO's, it's like the old cowboy in a Western riding off in the sunset, or something happened. So without getting too deep into the weeds here, what were some of the challenges that when you walked into that building, you're like, oh boy, I got to take care of this?
Well, the company had gone through, like every other retailer at that point, the what was called the Great Recession, if you might recall.
Yeah.
And had not bounced back like others. By 2013, still sort of struggling with some of the residual challenges of 2008, 9, 10. We'd had multiple years of sort of contracting profitability. That's the first thing I had to take care of. We had to return to profitability. And those aren't easy things to do.
It doesn't sound it, no.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways it is. I mean, what levers you have to pull if you've been down this road of a turnaround before. But it's not always easy to get people to pull those levers. And I think that the big challenge, if I want to call it that, maybe just the dichotomy in the dynamics here, is that the company understood intellectually that it needed to change, but was struggling more from a philosophical perspective on, does change mean that we're going to lose the heart of this company? And Maxine had pumped the company full of heart and caring, and the truth is, a lot of times people think that a successful company that is also really conscientious about the way it treats its employees and how it treats its guests and how it thinks about its place in the world can't be successful, but that's not the case. And I needed to convince this organization, for them to come along with me on this ride of change, that we indeed could forge a path that led to success without losing our heart.
And let's talk about the evolution now of Build-A-Bear, because at its heart, it's an experience store. You go in to build the bear yourself and pick and choose what the bear looks like. But your company has embraced e-com, and it's been exploding from what I've read recently, obviously for reasons we all know why. But when did the company embrace e-com as part of their profitability?
So when I arrived in 2013, we did have buildabear.com, but it wasn't being optimized. It wasn't being really used to drive sales in a really aggressive way. And when you look around at what your opportunities are, clearly we needed to right size our retail and get that back on a profitable path. But it's hard to ignore what was and still is the fastest growing retail channel, which is e-commerce. And it was difficult in some ways to get, and in fact, I didn't get 100% alignment that this was a big opportunity for us because we are known as an experiential retailer. Well before that was even something people talked about.
Right. Or knew what that meant.
So, yeah, and in some cases, Maxine's given credit for inventing the best in class in experiential retail, which now many retailers, if not all, to some degree, strive to be in the physical brick and mortar space. But we needed to find a way. That was not an option. The option did not include, we don't really need to be in e-commerce.
Right.
The challenge to the organization was, we don't have an option, and we need to find out and figure out and build toward a strategy where we participate fairly in this massively growing digital economy. The idea that we would just be singularly brick and mortar and not participate in that didn't, and still doesn't, make sense. So it wasn't the if, it's the how. And do you want to try to recreate the experience online, or do you want to expand your consumer base or expand your product offerings? And what was happening at exactly the same time, where we were becoming multi-generational, in that the kids that had grown up with Build-A-Bear now were grown and had kids of their own, and in some cases wanted to participate in Build-A-Bear on the collector side, or again gifting, adult to adult gifting. So we developed a long-term strategy that our stores would be the primary acquisition and sales tool for our traditional guest, which are kids, 3 to 8, 3 to 10, and their parents, and that we would develop a marketing strategy, product strategy that would appeal first, a primary target, to teens, tweens, and adults with new and interesting types of licensing, like Pokemon or Harry Potter, or now things like the Matrix Bear or WandaVision, or the Friends collection, and create a gifting business. And so that market is now 40% of our total sales.
Wow.
I know, right? People don't realize that. And e-commerce is 20% of our net rev. And, it's been a really exciting, experience for us to keep pushing and trying and pushing and trying and building out these relationships where we're, mastering a little bit more every day, how to manage our 12 million people in our that we have first party data on, or the majority of which are in our bonus club, which is our loyalty program. And, what's the next, exciting license we're going to launch. And when you think about what's the future, we will continue to build out our store business and create those incredible special memories with that one experience, almost like none other. But at the same time, that business has allowed us to have, what would be a much larger potential addressable market in categories that are many times the size, like gifting or collectibles, that are many times the size of plush or toys.
I'm just curious if you'd like to spill the tea. Did you have any internal pushback when you started sort of like waving the flag about like the importance of e-commerce? Were there people internally like, Sharon, come on, you're new here. We're a brick and mortar. We don't need to do any of that e-com stuff. Was there any of that in the company?
Yeah. There was. It wasn't in a disrespectful way, but it's a fair question. But at the same time, there was enough data that even if the vision of what it could be was completely agreed upon, there was a fundamental alignment that we can't ignore it. So when we needed to rebuild our e-commerce platform because we weren't optimized, that was an agreed upon investment across the board. Sometimes you don't have to, everyone doesn't have to be in agreement of the bigger vision.
Sure.
You just need to be taking steps along the way. And if you can get people to take that one step, that next step, and test and learn and move into it and keep evolving, that's the key. Other than getting people to believe in a much larger mission statement about who you are as a company at your heart, everybody doesn't have to be 100% aligned with the long-term objectives, because they may evolve based on information and learning and environment. You just need to be able to hold hands enough to take that next step.
And have you what-ifed March 2020 when the lockdown happens and malls across the country are closed down? And do you what-if and be like, what if we didn't have built up this e-commerce and put some muscle behind it? I mean, we'd be screwed, right? Have you had those sort of thoughts in your brain?
I try not to.
Okay, sorry. Sorry about that.
Of all the things, though, there's some things are good planning. Anybody will tell you this that's done anything. Some of it's luck. We had literally just flipped the switch on a new warehouse management system in February of 2020.
Oh boy.
And signed up a much more robust deal with Salesforce to allow us to really push on the marketing, more efficient marketing in a much more analytical way on the internet.
Wow.
And that warehouse management system, one of the key elements of that was more transparency of inventory from the warehouse to what's in our stores. So you could shift to this, magic term called omni-channel. Because if you don't have knowledge in better real-time knowledge about what's at your store levels, it's hard to do buy online, ship from store, buy online, pick up from store, anything like that. Your inventory is narrowed to what's in your warehouse, and you can't use your stores as shipping pool points. Those two things made a huge difference. Wow. We ended 2020 with triple-digit growth in e-com. And it was our single largest source of revenue when our stores shut down. 100% stores shut down in March of 2020.
It's very suspicious, Sharon. It almost sounds like you knew COVID was happening. I don't know. You were almost too well prepared for this.
Yeah, boy, I might have made some different choices if I'd known that.
That's true.
But that was fortuitous, for sure.
Wow. And talk to me now about the fact that things have opened up. Talk to me what's going on the ground at your stores, because, COVID's not going anywhere. COVID's going to be around. What kind of measures have you taken in place to keep the premier experiential sort of experience still the best as it always been, even though we're living in this pandemic?
Well, we started evolving that and writing new training manuals and taking people through new processes and thinking out through the entire in-store experience the week after we shut all the stores down. And I think that goes back to sort of that previous conversation about the fact that we then had these Salesforce tools in place and this warehouse management tool in place and all of this lined up. Even in that situation, it's one thing to have all the tools. It's another thing to lean in. Even though everything was shut down and we had done all this, sometimes people still don't see the opportunity. And it would have been easy, and in some cases many retailers did, to say, well, there's really not much we can do here. And this organization, this team, this leadership team, we quickly shifted to focus on, well, what's in our control versus being almost frozen about what's not in our control. And it took us about a week or so. We had set up these daily conference calls because there was so much happening so fast. And we were calling them like the COVID calls. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I am not getting up and having a COVID call. We changed them to the success meetings. And just by changing the name, seems so simple, so silly in many ways, it helped us change our mindset. And that's when we were like, we are going to look at this as, what would I do if I had the quote unquote luxury of all of my stores being closed? How would I focus my time, energy, and money? And we're like, wow, we would drive our e-commerce. And we started doing that. And what if we believed that this is just temporary and we're going to thrive? It's not just about survival. What would we be doing right now with the remaining store leadership that's in the company? Because we sadly had to furlough like 90% of our organization. And they're like, we would immediately start preparing to reopen instead of just like, oh no, this, that, the other. And that's what that team did. They immediately started writing manuals to reopen the stores. We had no idea when we were going to reopen. But you just think about that shift of mindset and what type of momentum that created, as well as what that says about this organization.
It's a great story, and I know you're a big fan of storytelling. You've got the book and podcast Stories in Heart, but talk to me about the power of story and storytelling. Why is that so important to you?
I think that it's part of my DNA to start with, just coming from a Southern background. I think Southerners tend to be storytellers, but it's really it's really just a human factor. People remember stories. They remember, facts and data better inside of a story. And as much as we're evolving and, there's, AI or anything that's coming down the pathway. We're still emotional creatures at heart. And when you can bring something to life visually with a story arc, with something that people can relate to, I think it helps people understand what you're trying to convey. And it really puts an exclamation point on it, because it usually evokes that just back to the Build-A-Bear goal, that heart and passion and drive are really what makes the world work, more than just getting up and trying to check boxes every day.
Well said. Her name is Sharon Price John. She is the CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshops. Sharon, this has been a great conversation. Wish you the best of luck on the podcast and book, and obviously keep doing what you're doing at Build-A-Bear, because it seems like it's working.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
You're very welcome, and make sure you log on to storiesandheart.com and sign up for updates and notifications. And that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.